Really? There was a moment of dizziness, but that passed even before I was able to reach out and grab the bars of coffee's cell door for balance. I'm totally okie doke. You get on outta here, Delacroix said, sounding like a nervy old woman telling a kid to climb down out of that air apple tree. You ain't supposed to be in there with no one else on the block. I looked at John Coffey, who sat on the bunk with his huge hands on the tree stumps of his knees. John Coffey looked back at me. He had to tilt his head up a little, but not much. What did you do, big boy? I asked in a low voice. What did you do to me? Helped, he said. I helped it, didn't I? Yeah, I guess, but how? How did you help it? He shook his head, right, left, back to dead center. He didn't know how he'd helped it, how he'd cured it, and his placid face suggested that he didn't give a rat's ass, any more than I'd give a rat's ass about the mechanics of running when I was leading in the last 50 yards of a 4th of July 2-miler. I thought about asking him how he'd known I was sick in the first place, except that would undoubtedly have gotten the same headshake. There's a phrase I read somewhere and never forgot, something about an enigma wrapped in a mystery. That's what John Coffey was, and I suppose the only reason he could sleep at night was because he didn't care. Percy called him the idiot, which was cruel but not too far off the mark. Our big boy knew his name, and knew it wasn't spelled like the drink, and that was just about all he cared to know. As if to emphasize this for me, he shook his head that deliberate way one more time, then lay down on his bunk with his hands clasped under his left cheek like a pillow and his face to the wall. His legs dangled off the end of the bunk from the shins on down, but that never seemed to bother him. The back of his shirt had pulled up, and I could see the scars that crisscrossed his skin. I left the cell, turned the locks, then faced Delacroix, who was standing across the way with his hands wrapped around the bars of his cell, looking at me anxiously. Perhaps even fearfully. Mr. Jingles perched on his shoulder with his fine whiskers quivering like filaments. "What dat darky man do to you?" Delacroix asked. "What at Gree-Gree? He tow some Gree-Gree on you?" Spoken in that Cajun accent of his, Gree-Gree rhymed with PP. "I don't know what you're talking about," Del. Devil, you don't. Look at you. All change. Even walk different, boss. I probably was walking different, at that. There was a beautiful feeling of calm in my groin, a sense of peace so remarkable it was almost ecstasy. Anyone who's suffered bad pain and then recovered will know what I'm talking about. Everything's all right, Del, I insisted. John Coffey had a nightmare, that's all. He agree man. Delacroix said vehemently. There was a nestle of sweat beads on his upper lip. He hadn't seen much, just enough to scare him half to death. He a hoodoo man. What makes you say that? Delacroix reached up and took the mouse in one hand. He cupped it in his palm and lifted it to his face. From his pocket, Delacroix took out a pink fragment, one of those peppermint candies. He held it out, but at first the mouse ignored it, stretching out its neck toward the man instead, sniffing at his breath the way a person might sniff at a bouquet of flowers. Its little oil drop eyes slitted most of the way closed in an expression that looked like ecstasy. Delacroix kissed its nose, and the mouse allowed its nose to be kissed. Then it took the offered piece of candy and began to munch it. Delacroix looked at it a moment longer, then looked at me. All at once I got it. The mouse told you, I said. Am I right? We. Like he whispered his name to you. We, in my ear he whisper it. Lie down, Del, I said. Have you a little rest?